you for joining us today. This is our third series in our webinar series called Starting Your Startup Journey, and it's on building a great startup team. And I'm super excited for this discussion today. I think it's super important, and the four of us met a few months ago and started talking about this topic. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today, to see the tips that come out. So hopefully you also benefit from some of the tips that come up from our discussion today. My name is Marie Bredberg, and I work as an investment manager with Biner Consulting. And I'm joined here today by some colleagues and friends who are going to discuss this topic. So we'll go around and make some presentations, and then we'll get right into the discussions on this topic. So Hans, why don't you join us? And today Hans is joining us digitally. Hans is not feeling so well today, but he's still well enough to join us on Teams. So why don't you start off with the introductions?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Karl Alveros. I've run a couple of startups during years. I started up by competing in Venture Cup 99 somewhere, and run a couple of startups. And I've always been interested in the team aspect of the startup, because I'm from Hunterston in Gothenburg, so I'm not the technician, but I'm usually I have technicians around me in the environment all the time. So team is my passion, and it's one of the top 5 reasons that companies fails, but it's not discussed that much and doesn't get the focus it should, I think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Totally agree with you on that. Why don't you go next, Karl?
Yes, sure. So, Karl, I'm a co-founder of an investment firm called Axilium, here also from Gothenburg. Banking and finance background, but very much a tech nerd as well. And I love the startups. I love being at the cutting edge of technology and seeing what's going to come tomorrow. And when we look at companies, we value the team very highly. We usually say that we put 50% weighting on the team as opposed to the product or the service. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of a lie. I think the truth is more 90% team, 10% product or service. So I don't think it matters how good your product or service is. If you can't get the right team together, you'll never succeed. So that's why this topic is very much at our core.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Madelene?
Yes, my name is Madelene Näslund, and I'm the regional manager, also here in Gothenburg, but Region West. I'm from Venture Cup, which hosts competitions for startups, and we're actually a platform where you might find some team members. And one of our criteria is also the team, which we highly value. So it's an important topic, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, good. So now that we've discussed why this is an important topic from your different perspectives, can we move into sort of the startup journey all the way from the beginning to maybe launch or IPO stage? And when in that journey is it important for startups to start thinking about the team? Why is that important? And what should they have in place in order to get started? Sure. Do you want to get started, Karl?
Shall I start? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, this is far from an exact science. There are many circumstances that come into play here, everything from the actual product, the service that you're launching, what stage are you at, the market, the people involved, personalities. So it's a difficult topic, but it's something that you need to think about throughout the entire journey and before the journey as well. So right through to your potential exit, because even on the exit side, especially if you're talking about co-founders or early employees that are really putting their soul into this, you need to be aligned on all the way through to exit.
Yeah.
So this is definitely something you need to think about the whole way through. And initially, you need to map out what you have and what you think you'll need along the journey.
Right. Exactly. So what sort of things do you think you need to have in place in order to get started? So if we think about building the right team and the competencies, are there any specific competencies that you need or that you've noticed in your lines of work which become critical right from the beginning? Hans, would you have any comments on that?
If we say that we have one founder and you should you're out for co-founder, I think that it's good to know each other a bit and it's in the case I don't really need that it need to complement you in one way, but it also should be a person that you can communicate very easily with. So diversity, I would say, isn't what you start from the very, very start. You build that in the next stage, because it's more important to trust and understand each other in the beginning than kind of filling all the gaps in your competence map.
Right, exactly. So when you think about having that competency map, and as a founder and evaluating a co-founder or who you should bring on, how can you do that? What are some tips and tricks about how you can identify those competencies?
In your co-founder?
Yeah, or who you need in your team.
I would say that, of course, it depends on who you are. What competences do you have? Like you said, it's not an exact science. But we talked earlier about if you don't have anyone to sell the service or the product, then no one will get it.
Right.
So someone who has the mindset of a salesperson.
Right.
It could be you, it could be someone. Is it a very tech service? Then you might need someone who knows how to develop it. Doesn't have to be in-house, but it could be beneficial. So I would say you have to first have a look at who am I and how far do I have until market and things like that. And then decide on where to start. But I would say sales, more or less, always.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I hear you say it's important to know who you are. So are you the one that's going to go out and sell? Are you going to go speak to investors? And it's important to have a product roadmap or some sort of roadmap that guides you so you know sort of the next step. What's your experience in this?
No, I think there's an important point there as well with the outsourcing versus having it in-house. So look at what you're trying to build. Are you trying to build IP? And then, of course, it's important to have that in-house so that you can have control over that. You can change it. Maybe you have an idea of what you want, but as you're working on this idea, then things change because you discover that something doesn't work, which means that you need to do it a different way instead.
Right.
So then it's important to have that in-house. Or you might have something that it's just grunt work. You can have programmers sitting in. A couple of weeks ago, I would have said Ukraine. Maybe I'll say a different country today, unfortunately. But I mean, you can just put it out there to India and Pakistan. There's great people. They get a very specific task to do, and they just do it for you, and then it's done. And there's no point bringing in people for that because they'll do it much cheaper. They'll do it quicker, and you can move forward faster. So I think it's important to identify what are the core competencies that you need in the team, and if you don't need it in the team, if you can do it cheaper and faster another way, then do that.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's about having a vision for what you want your company to be in the future also. Right. Good. So now having established sort of the what and the who, what we need and who we need, when should we bring on these competencies? When is it important? We talked about, Hans, you mentioned the co-founder role is really important to have in the beginning. But are there any specific points after you get started that can give you an indication of when different team members should be brought on?
Hans, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, sure. I think that you should start early and discuss the roadmap, and also see that you align the roadmap among you. If you see what gates you see in the journey, and then you will also see what competencies you will need in those to achieve those gates. When you do that, you can work with a scenario where you get competence and get the ideas in the head of people that you think that you will need, like kind of a heads up, because you would never exactly know, but you can start the discussion with the people you think you need at different levels.
Right. What do you think about like at different stages? So you've developed a prototype, or you're ready to launch, or you have to prepare for your A series round. What are the different stages or milestones that are important to bringing on additional team members?
You go ahead.
Well, I guess initially it's you want to build a strong core. So the more strength and competence you can have in the founding team, the better. I think it's generally better to have a founding team than a single founder, because then you can take the blows, you can adapt much quicker. And then as you go through the stages, if you go right through to when you've got the money, then of course you're at commercial terms. And then it's a gradual line then from that initial stage where you have no money to when you can pay commercial terms. And getting along that line at the different stages, you find combinations of different packages to offer people. But it can be shares, it can be bonus systems. If it's sales, it can be commission-based. And I think that usually works itself out as long as you find the people that share the vision. Because then they want to be part of that journey. That's more important than the money. I also think that it's not just employees we're talking about here, it's all the stakeholders. So you've got potential customers. That's a wealth of information. Use them, go out and talk to them. They'll be more than happy to spend time helping you and giving you lots of tips and ideas and saying what they want, how they would want the product to see, how much they think they would be willing to pay for it, all that sort of stuff. You can get lots of information just by asking. Then you can get advisors that have done this journey before or a similar journey. Some of them will help you for free as well because they're just excited about it. And you can get board members in, you can get early investors in, angel investors that might contribute very little money, but might have a lot of competence. So use everything that you've got and don't be afraid to ask, I would say.
Yeah, that's one of the key things. Always ask or always tell what's your next step or what you need, because almost everyone you meet will want to help you.
Right.
And they might know someone. And if they know about your needs, then they can help you in another way. Because if you keep it to yourself, then they don't know that you need help.
Right.
So always ask and always tell, because you get so much more back.
Right. Exactly. I've heard that it's important to pay attention to specific milestones. So when you achieve different things in your product development journey and you see like, okay, now we have paying customers, or now we've achieved this grant, or we've received this funding, those milestones or those achievements should be indicators for sort of moving on with your team building plan. I guess it's tempting to want to bring on different roles and competencies at different points, but it's important to pay attention to specific milestones as well.
Sure, and often that would be a case of salary increases. For example, if you've got below market, you would do a salary increase in combination with a funding round.
Yeah,
and obviously also bring in new people.
Right, exactly. So then, I mean, you touched a little bit on how to attract people, but I think that's a really important question is with limited budgets, how do startups attract those competencies that they identified in the beginning? Because I know that that's really challenging for a lot of startups to, when they're in that sort of death valley, as they call it, and the funds are low, but the need to ramp up and scale is high. What can they do to attract those right competencies?
I would say if you have your roadmap and have a vision clear where you want to go, then set the culture early so so you have that in place.
Yeah.
Because then when you go into the valley, then it might sound like a cliche, but you will attract people if you have the right mindset. And I heard from Techno Creatives, a company here in Gothenburg, Emma Rosada, one of the founders. She said that during the last years, all of the new employees found them through their events and parties. And perhaps when you're struggling, you don't want to have a party, but have your vision set higher and look further away.
Right.
And what you do now and who you meet and who hears about your company now might be a future employee.
That's a great tip, is to focus on sort of the external things that you do that maybe create an awareness about your company without having to really go out and do spend much money on different marketing activities, but you can have an event that draws people in.
It can also be that you show that you care about your staff, like bringing in a personal trainer every Friday, and show that we care about your health. We want you to be healthy. The work isn't everything here. We care about you as a person, that you stay healthy, and things like that. And when you hear about, that's also attracting people because people talk.
Yeah, exactly. Hans, do you have any comments on that? How do you attract the right people to your company?
I think you shouldn't underestimate the power of passion and fulfilling yourself or fulfilling your team around you, because if they are employed at the consultant's house, for example, they are in one way in the back seat, and you will offer them a front place in the front seat, and that's worth a whole lot because they're going to see a totally different scenario, and they will get experiences that they will never get. So you kind of actually offering very much more than you might think in personal development in all levels. Even if it's not going well, it doesn't really matter. It's going to build experience. And it's kind of being the underdog in a team. If you build that strong feeling of we're an underground team and we're going to show them, it's very powerful. So you got more attraction than you think most of the time.
It's a challenge, isn't it?
Because money is always the easy stuff. It's you can have it, you can lose it. It comes and goes. But a journey like this is something else.
Right. Exactly.
Interesting, because, and I would say also make a difference between who are the people we're talking about here to attract. Are they core people that you can't? This company will just not succeed without these people, because then they really need to be on the equity side somehow. And if it's other people that are important to have, but it's not that particular person, but it's that particular role that needs to be filled, then I think this cultural aspect comes into play. And this is general people management skills for all companies. You want to be a fun place to work. Because you're going to go through tough times, it's going to be late hours and all that sort of thing. And it doesn't need to be expensive. You can be having, invite everyone around to your place, tell them to bring their families and have a barbecue and different events, fun things that you do together, and make sure that people are having a good time at work. So obviously sharing the vision and all of that sort of stuff as well, but make it a fun place to work. Give people empowerment, let them be able to come up with their own ideas and don't micromanage them.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something very important. The work-life balance is growing and it's becoming more and more important. But also, I've read somewhere that if you feel that you can't affect your way of work, that kills the motivation directly.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's really important.
Yeah. And I guess working in a really early stage startup, effectively, you should be able to have a really high impact on your work. So that's what makes it attractive as well, is that you can do that in an early stage startup. And I think also in the stage that we're talking about, often it is not a 9-to-5 job. You know, it is sort of work when you need to work. And maybe your team members have another job, or they're working several jobs because they, at the end of the day, they do need to make things work at home as well. But maybe they're super passionate about what they're doing with you. So the time that you work together in this early stage startup is so valuable, right? So make it fun.
Yep.
I think you said before, treat them like family, because they essentially are like family. So that's really important. That led into the next question that I had about maintaining your team. Because as hard as it is to get team members, you definitely don't want to lose the ones that you get. So I think we've talked a little bit about that, maintaining your team, but that's really important.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that will make you lose your team quite fast is when you give promises that you don't follow up on.
Yeah.
And that they see that it's just air, it's nothing.
Right.
That will also kill the motivation quite fast.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think be transparent and open with them as well, which I suppose is the same as being honest. But sometimes you just tell them the way it is. We have very limited funds, but we have a huge potential. And when we reach this stage, then we're going to have an across the board 10% salary increase. And make sure they're aware of everything that's happening, because that gives them a sense of cognitive control.
Yeah, exactly. I have sort of a general question to you all, and you stated it in the beginning that this topic isn't discussed enough, but it's so important. Why do you think that this topic isn't given as much focus? It's so important, and we see that when you look at statistics of startups that succeed or fail, the team is super vital. And even from an investor's perspective, as you said, you might forego an investment because of the team. But yet we don't spend enough time focusing on it. We have a lot of discussions about how you build a product, lean startup development, about the idea, but not so much about the team. Why do you think that is? Anyone want to?
Yeah, well, I think I can start to sort of think out loud on the topic, because it's an interesting question. It's who's asking the questions, and very much you're talking about a product or service, and then you're looking at the market need, and okay, so this is what you're doing, and this is the need that you're fulfilling, and who's going to buy it, and all of that sort of stuff. And you've got a lot of stakeholders that are interested in that. Whereas the people involved, there's not as many people asking those questions. You've got investors, and but that's almost it. Then you've got the startups themselves asking themselves this question. So it's really important, but it's not important for so many people, because it's not important for the market. Because if you don't succeed, you never reach the market, and the market never knows about you, so nobody cares. So I think that's the reason it doesn't get as much focus, because there's just not as many stakeholders that are concerned about it.
Impacted by it. Yeah. But it's super important for the founding team to consider.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Hans, you founded the startup Jungle. What was one of the reasons you found that to be important in describing sort of the team or the organization that's needed for that startup journey? Because that sort of highlights this topic.
Yeah, I kind of picture the team is kind of carrying the idea in their hands. And this is a fragile thing. And if the team doesn't handle it, it will be dropped in the junk somewhere. So you said it before, it's the people that because the first idea is often not the best. So the people need to adjust the idea. Is it the people that need to find new customers when the first one doesn't buy? Is the people that want to present it to investors?
Yeah.
So it's the team that doing all the carrying of the services to the market. So they are crucial, and I think that many companies are created by technical men. That's a fact, and they focus on tech and perhaps the IP side of their idea. And I think there's an awareness because they haven't studied team building and all the things around building teams and building collective intelligence and stuff. They don't know about it, so they don't discuss it. And I also think that there's some kind of embarrassment in the many companies that do fail. They are a bit embarrassed that it's a team that broke down the idea, so you don't hear about it.
I just had a thought that struck me right now when you were talking about the team carrying the idea. And maybe there's a misconception in this topic that the team has to be compensated employees. And of course, after a period of time in the startup journey, you definitely want to secure commitment by compensation. But in the really early stages, perhaps it's just a group of people who believe in an idea, who come together because they're passionate about that. So if you are in an early stage startup, maybe the first thing you should start doing is, as you said, talk about your idea, talk to people, get people interested in it, meet, carry that idea carefully, explore it, and then see where it goes. And then over time, you start to create different compensation packages for maintaining. But I think often we have it backwards. We think, okay, we have to, of course, we need to know the problem and the market, and we have to have the right product or this minimal viable product out there. But that team or that collaboration of people is actually really important to think about right from the beginning, carrying that idea carefully. Yeah. We are closing in on the webinar, but I just want to open it up for some questions. If anyone has any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Let's see. Okay, so here's a question. We have a product that's ready to sell or launch. Where do I start? How would you answer that?
Okay, so I take it it's something that's been in development for a while, and now they're ready to hit the market. I think I know this topic is people, but I think in this instance, it's very important to have done your marketing analysis to work out who is the market, how do you best reach that market, what's the best way to get them to buy your product. And in many cases, it's maybe not a salesperson. It's a marketing person that you need, a marketing analytics person that can help you with that to do the numbers. And or it's something that requires someone that's got a lot of experience from that particular market, and that you need to get on board. If it's a complex product, or if it's an easy product that needs a lot of people, then look for groups. You might get in a whole sales team, commission based, or you might go via distributors. So think about your product, think about the market and how products are normally sold in that market, and then adjust according to that.
Good. Do you have any comments, Madelene or Hans, on that one?
I agree. No, I think it's...
I'll just add something that you should find your chimpanzee.
Chimpanzee.
Everybody knows what the chimpanzee does, right? The chimpanzee is the innovator client. It's the most. It's a crazy open person that want to be part of early ideas.
Yeah.
So most of the time, it's small companies with like charismatic persons around it that like to be part of the journey. And most of the time, it isn't the big corporations. They are not that risk in early stages. So go for the kind of people that want to really help you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would add to that and say that in the early stages, it's less about finding someone who fills a specific role and more about finding someone who can fill sort of a personality. Right. So because often one person will take on multiple roles. And if you have a chimpanzee, they probably like to go out and sell, so they want to be sort of the center of attention, etc. So that's, again, going back to identifying what competencies you need and who you are and what you lack right from the beginning.
And I would add, in practice, it's usually the CEO role of a startup company. If that's the founder or if that's someone who's come on board, it doesn't matter. But usually that you don't have a CEO that just sits there and sort of dictates things on a strategic level. It's a CEO that's very much a doer and usually has the sales hat to start with. So if you don't already have that person on board, then that's probably where you should start.
Yeah. And I will also say that the smaller the team, you need people who are comfortable in the different hats and willing to change a lot and often to see what's needed today and what can I fill.
Yep. Very good. There's another question that's on how do you deal with either having the wrong person on your team. So how do you manage that? We've been talking about bringing on the right competencies, the right team members, but now all of a sudden you have someone who doesn't quite fit anymore. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, and that's a good question because it's inevitably gonna happen. And how do you deal with it? I suppose it depends on when it happens. But I think a general rule of thumb is deal with it as quickly as possible. Don't lie to yourself. Try to fix it, but try to fix it quickly. And when you see that it doesn't work, then try to cut it as quickly as possible. If it's a co-founder, that's a problem. It might cost you a lot. You might have to buy them out, use your investors maybe to help you. But just get rid of them because they suck so much energy out of it. And this isn't a situation where it's a bad leaver situation. You might have a situation where the company changes and that person's skills just aren't required anymore, and they realize it themselves, and then you can amicably find some way for them to exit. In some circumstances, they could stay on as a passive shareholder if they're a shareholder. But if it's an employee, then you just have to get rid of them as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And
move on, because otherwise they'll drag you down, they'll drag the rest of the team down and pose a big risk to your development.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like you said, do it early or as soon as you realize it, because you might be able to hold it if it's your idea and things like that. But the team, if you've gathered a good team on the other people, and it's just this one, and they leave, then you're back at zero or even lower. So it can ruin a lot.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Very good. Okay. I sort of, to wrap this session up, I would like to ask each of you a question. From your own experience, you talked about why you think this is important, but from your different experience working with startups, where do you find that startups struggle the most in this journey? Is it the identification of the what and the who? Is it when? Is it how? Is it maintaining? Where do they struggle the most from your perspective?
I would say both the how and where to actually find good people, but also the when.
Yeah.
I think they start thinking about it too late. You should think about it way ahead of when you're going to act. So thinking and acting are different things.
Yeah.
But start thinking early. But because then you have the time to perhaps find the how.
Yeah.
Because if you're thinking about it early, then you have your eyes open and ears open to who you meet. And you might find potential co-workers where you didn't think they would be.
Right.
So I think that could be a way of getting the how.
And you work with Venture Cup, so right now you're in a startup competition.
Yeah.
So when you're evaluating these startups, is this something that you look for, like at least the thinking part, or how do you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of our criteria is the team.
Yeah.
And I actually have like a story where two teams were competing in the same competition, but they actually find each other and then made a new company. So they find the competence throughout our web page. So that's also a way. So like we've said, companies change and ideas change, but find a good team. And that's what they did.
Yeah.
So Venture Cup, good way to find people.
That's great. That's great. Karl, what do you think about that question?
Yeah, no, I agree that it's the how and the when is important. I think sometimes things, you get ahead of yourself. So you don't think about it enough in the beginning. Because in the beginning, you have a chance to build that strong core with these people that I said before that the company can't live without. You just know you can't succeed without these people. And if you sort of start without those people and add them a bit later, then they don't have that sense of I was there from the beginning. This is my baby just as much as yours, and you started together. And then they become more expensive. They maybe become harder to attract as well. So I think building that core and having as much as the core competencies in the founding team as possible betters your chance of success exponentially, because then you can always weather out any storm. You can always survive. You get employees in that you need that are wrong, that need to leave, and you've always got this core team that can carry the most important tasks in the company.
Yeah. And in your role, you come in a little bit later in the stage of a startup. So how do you evaluate the team or the startups against the team when they come to you at that stage?
Yeah, so we do look at that core. And sometimes there's parts of the core that are missing, but we can sort of live without it. But then we want to see that there's a plan there for when those gaps are going to be filled, and that there's a recognition that those gaps exist, because sometimes founders don't see those gaps. It could be a founder that has the CEO role. They have the CEO role because they happen to be the founder, nothing else.
Yeah.
And they don't really have any idea of what a CEO role is and what they really need to be doing, because they're too busy with their product development. And they don't see that, well, in 2 years' time, when we launch this, then I'm not the right person for this role. So it's really important for us that they see that. So they don't necessarily need to have the right team in place today that's going to be the right team in 2 years' time, but then they need to recognize that those gaps exist, and they need to have a business plan in place that sees those gaps being filled.
So they need to do the sort of the what and the who, and also have that core team in place.
Yes, or a plan for it.
And a plan for it. Okay, Hans, how would you, from your perspective and your experience, where do you find that startups struggle most in this journey?
The easiest way is to find develop people. Of course, it's the classics. But I think that the hardest part is when you don't have funding and people kind of need to jump on board on the ship with extremely lot of uncertainty. So you can't really. I have an idea. I have a sketch on a whiteboard. Do you want to join this? That's really. Then you really need to enjoy and be passionate about the first phase that kind of doesn't offer anything except for the challenge, and you have max uncertainty and risk.
Right. And in your work, you coach and consult a lot of companies on team building. So what's your advice in this area, other than showing passion? Yeah.
I think that the companies, just like they go to the gym and exercise for staying healthy, they should discuss team building subjects in the team weekly. Like what do I thinking? What do we have conflicts? Are we discussing what we're good at? Do I know myself what I'm good at? Perhaps not. Then I perhaps need to do a personality test and discuss that with someone, external person perhaps, that could bring up questions that you can discuss. So you kind of need to, as with everything, you need to discuss it daily, weekly, how your team is working and performing, and like doing what you're doing. It doesn't do it just itself. It needs to be facilitated, and perhaps you could have a management book that you discuss every month and read and.
I think that's really great. Those are really great tips. And the thing that pops out to me is just to be intentional about team building. So in the same way that you're intentional about product development, you also need to be intentional about building your team, which is things like setting goals together or meeting frequently to discuss whatever's going on in the team. And I think early stage startups feel that, we're too small. We don't want to waste our time with those things. But eventually that small team becomes a big team, hopefully, and the culture comes with it. So it's important to, in the very beginning, build that culture.
Absolutely.
Of intentionality. Well, very good. Thank you all so much for joining our webinar today. And we hope that you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, please contact me. You can visit our website to check us out at Biner Startup Partner or biner.se. And thank you very much. We'll post some clips of this on social media as well. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Ariel.
Bye.